House of the Dragon changed a hell of a lot of the story and characters when being brought to life on screen by Ryan Condal. If you've ever watched one of my reviews, then you know that 9 out of 10 of these changes tend to be worse and detrimental to the story being told. We're at a point now where Season 3 is kinda just doing its own thing, vaguely following the plot of George R. R. Martin's story. I am at heart a book purist. My preference will always be for an adaptation to be as close to the source material and the author's intent as possible. It might surprise you, there are some changes House of the Dragon has made that I do enjoy and think have enhanced the story in some way. Adapting Fire and Blood was always going to be a challenge. While the frame of the story of the dance is there, and a basic understanding of the characters, many of these gaps needed to be filled in to make a coherent and functional TV show. In many cases, these changes made from the book are enhancing what's already there, which is often the best way to approach an adaptation. I think a perfect example of this is how they handled Sir Simon Strong. Simon in Fire and Blood is an extremely minor character. We know next to nothing about him other than his brief role in the story. We don't know anything about his character or personality. That meant when House of the Dragon was adapting Daemon's stay at Harrenhal during Season 2, they needed to flesh out characters like Simon to actually have someone for Daemon to be interacting with and talking to all season. I think Simon Strong was the best example of them taking a shell of a character, fleshing him out to the point he was one of the highlights of Season 2. Simon Russell Beale had a lot of freedom to do what he wanted with the character, and as a result we were given this funny, witty, and overall wholesome character that really worked well with Matt Smith's more serious and brooding Daemon Targaryen. Daemon's Harrenhal arc certainly had its issues, but Simon Strong was not one of them. I think what makes Simon work so well for both casual viewers and book fans is for casual viewers, he's this light character, but what makes him work especially well for book fans is while we're enjoying Simon's character, in the back of our minds we know his sad fate at the hands of Aemond One-Eye. I think a testament to how well Simon Strong was written is when he does die during episode 2 of Season 3. It's genuinely a sad moment. I felt more sorrow at the death of Simon Strong than I did for Jace the episode prior. Now, that either highlights how beloved Simon was, or how badly handled Jace's arc and writing has been. I don't think the showrunners for a second intended for people to feel more sorrow at Simon than Jace. He really did a lot for humanising Daemon's character, and it was a nice touch to see Daemon slightly moved and sad when learning of the death of Simon. It's certainly going to give the God's Eye an even more venom. Daemon's Harrenhal arc was a bit hit and miss in Season 2. Given Daemon's minimal role in this part of the story in the book, they had to find something for a fan favourite character, and Matt Smith, one of the stars of the show, to do all season. I know it will be controversial putting it on this list, but I do it with a caveat. I think the concept of the arc was a very good idea. I believe the writers just took it a bit too far. Part to Game of Thrones that really disappointed me was how they stripped away a lot of the magical elements of the world building. It's nice in House of the Dragon to really get a spooky Harrenhal with this sense of dread and unease. The idea behind Daemon's visions was brilliant, and it was a great way to bring back the likes of Millie Alcock and Paddy Considine for cameos. However, having him tripping balls all season maybe didn't have the effect the writers were going for. Some of the visions were so out of place and uncalled for, such as the Alicent Targaryen one. I really enjoyed seeing Daemon and Alice interact, and it certainly adds another layer to the Aemond-Alice dynamic, and eventually the God's Eye. For me, the reason I wanted to include parts on this list is for its conclusion. I love Daemon's wayward vision. While the whole Aegon's prophecy thing is divisive, I'm at least glad they're committing to it. I didn't care that much about the Daenerys cameo. For me, what really stood out was seeing Helaena and Bloodraven, and I hope the fact that Daemon saw Helaena in this vision isn't completely overlooked in Season 3, and we might get a brief moment between the two of acknowledgement of it. Then to top it off, we get a Green Man cameo, which is some very deep cut lore from the books, the kind of magical and mythical stuff that I want to see more of. It seems crazy to me that Condal and the writers cut or changed so much great content from Fire and Blood and really dropped the ball with the likes of Blood and Cheese, yet included the bloody green men of all things. So Daemon's Harrenhal arc is far from perfect, and yeah, they did drag it out far too long, but there is some really good content in there, and some stuff fans of the deep lore will love. The Battle of the Gullet during episode 1 of season 3 was a bit of a mixed bag. It's actually not an easy battle to adapt. We have the larger macro version of it, where we know how some of the key events went down, but other than that, Fire and Blood is a bit vague with the details, so making a 20-minute battle sequence out of a paragraph of book is difficult. Naval battles are also monstrously expensive and difficult to film. I mean, for example, nearly every single line of dialogue in this battle, from the grunts of people fighting to character dialogue itself, would have needed to be redubbed in ADR post-production. People really don't get how big of an issue working around water is, be that bodies of water or rain. Now, I have a bit of experience working in TV as a screenwriter in a writer's room, and I have been on sets in case any dialogue needs to be reworked or there's questions about scripts. Even something as simple as a dripping tap can utterly screw your audio. That's how sensitive these microphones are. So yeah, shooting anywhere near water, especially on water, is a nightmare. So while I was underwhelmed by the Gullet, I understood why it happened the way it did. But there was a sequence in it that's not in the book that I loved. It's when Lohar and Corlys go through the Dragonstone Pass. Even as Corlys' ship is slowly moving through the pass, you can feel the tension rise as the water gets ever more shallow. In lore, Corlys is supposed to be one of the greatest sailors that ever lived, with his famed 9 voyages around the world, making him the man he is now. It was great to see him using his knowledge of sailing to get through the pass, and physically see him taking the helm and sailing the ship to safety. We got a glimpse of why Corlys Velaryon became a seafaring legend, became the Sea Snake. There was a young Corlys Velaryon spin-off in the works that we really have not heard anything about for years. I know at one stage it was live action, and there was later talks about it becoming an animated project. Regardless, I didn't care much for this idea until this sequence. I definitely want a show about a young sea snake and his 9 voyages, even if it's just a limited series. Kind of like A Song of Ice and Fire meets Black Sails. For lore fans, we would get to see parts of the world that we're certainly never going to have time to explore in the books. So yeah, I kinda hope this happens now, and that small sequence during the overall Battle of the Gullet really did stand out for me, from the way it was both shot and acted. One of the biggest points of contention with Fire and Blood that arises because we are not viewing the story through point of view, and it's why Viserys is so intent to keep Rhaenyra his named heir after the birth of Aegon, when he knew the issues this would likely cause upon his death. Yes, he did bury his head in the sand with much of what was happening around him, but deep down I think he knew how the world worked and how Rhaenyra's succession would be challenged. As a reader, we don't really get to understand why Viserys was so motivated to walk down this dangerous road and take his family with him. But I think the fleshing out House of the Dragon did with Viserys as a character really does explain his motives and thought process. Viserys is primarily motivated in the show to name Rhaenyra his heir out of sheer grief of the death of Aemma Arryn and baby Balon. Even after he marries Alicent, we see the ghost of Aemma looms heavy over him, from slips of the tongue to her being on his mind as he lay dying. But it's deeper than that. I think his insistence on keeping Rhaenyra his heir after Aegon's birth comes from a deep guilt. Aegon is the son he always wanted, but he's the wrong son. Aegon isn't Aemma's son. I think Viserys is clearly haunted by the guilt of how Aemma died and the role he played in it. In the book, we're simply told that Aemma died from complications of birthing Balon. What House of the Dragon did was really expand on that. Aemma's death is harrowing, giving Viserys this awful choice between his unborn son and his wife. But what makes it worse is Aemma begging Viserys not to do it, that this was done very much against her will. Viserys subjected his wife to this torturous death, yet lost Balon anyway. That grief, that guilt impacts every decision Viserys makes for the rest of his life. Don't get me wrong, I think he does love Alicent in a different way than he did Emma, but in terms of his sons, there was always this distance between them, and that certainly impacted Aegon and Aemond as they grew up. I think the way they handled Viserys' declining health and death also reflects this, and how he lived his life. In Fire and Blood, he kind of just dies of a heart attack from drinking too much and general excess. In the show, we have him literally rotting alive, all starting from a simple cut by the Iron Throne itself. Almost like the weight of being king and the choices he has made. His last walk up to the throne was one of the best moments in the entire show. We have him seeing his family getting along with this brief moment, giving him hope of peace before dying. Delirious and alone, calling out Emma's name. Now, this final one is a bit of a hot take on my part, and I know I might get a bit of shit for it, but it does come with a caveat, a bit like Daemon's Harrenhal arc. I actually really enjoyed the concept of Alicent and Criston Cole's relationship. It makes sense on a lot of levels, and I think it was clearly being telegraphed since season 1. You have Criston Cole, who sees Alicent as his righteous figure, and someone whom quite literally saved his life from his own hand, and likely from the aftermath of killing Joffrey Longmouth. She saved him physically and spiritually. You have Alicent, who finds herself in need of allies after Otto leaves court, and she finds that in Criston Cole, who is unquestionably loyal to her and also has this deep resentment of Rhaenyra and her actions and position. There was certainly some intentional chemistry between them in the back half of season 1. It makes sense after Viserys' death that Alicent, wanting to live freely after being repressed for so long, would use Criston Cole in this way, someone who views her as this godlike figure. There is a lot of other levels to this, such as the hypocrisy of it on both Alicent and Criston Cole's part as well, for different reasons. Now, here's the caveat. As much as I enjoyed it, and I think on paper, the idea really makes a lot of sense, and was clearly planned for in season 1. But it's one of those cases where the show just took it a little bit too far, and it's impacted how viewers feel about the entire storyline. Kind of the same way they overplayed Daemon's Harrenhal visions. If they had opened the season with their secret relationship and have it slowly break down as the season progresses, as Cole's power grows and Alicent's wanes, we see Alicent slowly loses the power to control Criston. When Cole begins to initiate their encounters, there's this dynamic and power switch between them. But they did take it too far. Having Alicent and Cole's relationship anywhere near Blood and Cheese was a huge misstep. I think impacted massively why so many view the show version of Blood and Cheese so negatively. Going from the horror of child murder to Helena finding Cole and Alicent having sex was dumb and helped to cause this underwhelming feeling of the whole sequence. Having the affair as the reason for Cole not guarding the family properly was certainly a choice to lessen the blame of the murder on other characters. And that's the thing. If I ignore their role in Blood and Cheese, I really enjoy what they did with their relationship. I think objectively, it did a lot to develop their characters. It's just they took it too far, involving them in Blood and Cheese itself. There's a lot wrong with Blood and Cheese in the show. And while I think if the Alicent and Cole scene had not been part of it, it wouldn't dramatically change how people view Blood and Cheese. It still would have been poor, but the inclusion of it just enhances an already sour taste.